So, hello and welcome back to Hal Tech TV. Today we will be reviewing the Cooler Master Elite 120 Advanced case. Now this will be a short and to the point review where we will cover all the points that we need to within a very short space of time. If you want the full in-depth review, go check out the written review, links will be down below. And if you want to check out the unboxing, links are down below as well. But for now, we have the video review of the Cooler Master Elite 120 Advanced case. So as any case review would go, we're going to start off with the front panel. So what we get with this case is two USB 2 ports, your headphone and microphone jack, your power button with the power LED inbuilt into it, hard drive LED, reset switch and USB 3 port. We also get one 5¼ inch drive bay and a 120mm intake fan behind this plate here. Now in terms of the buttons, now a lot of people make a big fuss about the buttons, and I'm kind of similar in a way. You know, I don't like horrible power buttons. A horrible power button could be a complete killer to the case for me. It could completely put me off. But these buttons I personally feel are quite nice. They could have a slightly deeper, what's the word, like where you have to push it further in to actually turn it on. But overall, I do actually quite like these buttons, and I do like Cooler Master buttons in general compared to some of them. The only Cooler Master button I didn't like was on the Trooper and Striker. Now, as I was talking about, we have the 120mm fan behind here, and the intakes for that are here, here, and here. Now, the problem with this case that I really don't like, and I have quite a problem with, is the fact that there's no dust filters. Now, on a small ITX case, dust filters are almost necessary, simply because, you know, it's cramped as it is, and if you have dust build up, the airflow is literally just going to stop and you're going to end up with overheating issues. My other problem, which is personal to me, it is not a problem with the case, is that this is aluminium. Now, aluminium stains with finger grease and everything, and I have stained it once or twice somewhere. You'll be able to see in the written review, I have pointed it out. But this isn't a problem with the case, this is due to me being lazy. So if you are lazy, do remember, don't touch the aluminium with your bare fingers. So moving on to the side panel, we have a perfectly sized ventilation slot for your graphics cards. So whatever kind of cooler that you're going to use on this case, this ventilation hole is going to take care of that perfectly fine. Remember though, it's not dust filtered. On the top we have a hole as well, cut out, which has a kind of a mesh thing insert on the inside as well, which it's not dust filtered, but it's similar to kind of dust filtering. And this is going to be perfect for if you want to have your power supply fan up, which personally I wouldn't use in this case, as there's a lot more benefits to using a power supply fan down. On the right hand side, we have the same cutout that we saw on the left hand side, and this is going to be good for if you're having airflow across the case rather than depth wise. Now moving on to the back, we have, I've unscrewed the kind of cover so it's kind of loose. On the back we have our power supply mount, which is rather extended by about an inch or so from the back of the case. Now this is going to cause a lot of problems in terms of cable management at the back of the case, simply because the cable on a power supply is the biggest cable that you're going to find in the back of the case. Now if you add the depth from this section, which is about an inch, onto the depth of the cable, which is going to be 1 to 2 inches depending on the cable, essentially you're going to have 2 to 3 inches behind the case where you can't push it further back against a wall or anything. Now with this case being essentially designed for kind of small form factor boards, which essentially it is, this is going to be the kind of thing that you're going to use on home theatre PCs or small media centres, and they're going to normally go in a place where really cable management is kind of important behind the case, so this could cause a lot of problems for you guys out there. We also have a hole here for what I believe is to be cable management rather than water cooling, as there's only one. 2 PCI brackets, which are toolless. You have your screws here, and you do screw them from the outside rather than the inside. We have some more ventilation here and our I/O bracket. Now, in terms of mounting the power supply, you do have to remove this bit and then push the power supply in, and it is quite simple, and I'll kind of show you that in a second. So now let's move on to not the inside of the case, but rather the inside of the front panel section. So as you can see, we've got the front panel back here. Now I've removed the cover for the case, which is all three sides in one piece of metal. Now the front panel is removable, really simple. And if you just push three kind of clips on the inside of the case, did I say simple before? It's easily removable. Sorry for my incredibly terrible English. We will find the inside of the front panel. Now this is going to be perfect for those of you guys who like to be able to change things around and such. So you can remove your 120mm fan here, which I would actually recommend removing because it's not that good, and you can replace that with whatever you want, which is, a standard feature. It's something that you essentially have to expect from every other case. However, the benefit to this is these bits here. These bits are removable as well, and for those of you who are thinking, well, that's not particularly important, who cares about that, you're going to be using them anyway, it is actually quite important on a mini-itx case, where cable management is kind of, the biggest importance. The right side is actually quite harder to remove than the left, but they basically, they unclip and they slide out very easily, and this is good for when you're building your case, because when you're building your system, having extra cables lying around, even in standard sized cases, this is a nightmare, because I hate having the I/O cables just lying around as I'm building the system, and it gets extremely annoying. Now, not only is this good, the fact that you can remove them so easily, it's not an amazing feature, but it is good for this particular purpose. Not only that, but if you take the left side panel, and there's a particular feature here that you aren't going to be using, for example, if you're going to be using it as a kind of media center in which you have, an external sound card or whatever, or an internal sound card for your big surround sound speakers, and you're not going to be using the front panel audio, you can actually remove these cables completely. These cables are modular. Now again, this is not a special feature to the case, this is not unique to this case, but you can actually remove them. So if you are going to be doing cable management in case when you're not going to be using these I/O ports, you can just completely remove the cable and leave it outside the system rather than having to tie it up somewhere, or in some cases cut it off completely if you're that much of a cable management freak, which essentially I am. So yes, essentially, without damaging the look of the front panel, you can put that back in. Unfortunately, it's not the same on the right hand side, as these features are kind of expected to be necessary anyway, especially with the on button and such. You can put these back on the left hand side, right hand side. Why am I getting everything wrong all of a sudden? You can put them back on, and it'll be as if nothing's changed to the front, because the connections are still there, but the cables aren't. So it's a nice feature for cable management, not particularly unique to this case, but for such a small case it is almost necessary. For the sake of proving a point, I've removed the I/O cables from the system for the review, just to show how easy it is to use the system and review the actual case without having the extra cables there. Now these cables here are for the fans, which obviously I could remove if I wanted while building the system, but I'm too lazy. Now they do come with a 3-pin to Molex adapter, which is a Molex pass-through. Now this particular fan is absolutely terrible. It's the worst fan I've ever come across, and I would recommend removing that and replacing it if you want. Now this bracket is necessary for keeping the power supply up, so if you remove the fan you probably don't want to remove this. Now, my biggest issue with the fan, which for me made me really annoyed and kind of put me off ever thinking about using this case for a system, which I was actually thinking, about, because it is a nice case, and I've had it on my desk for a few weeks, checking out and everything, and really getting a feel for it. The issue here is that the actual depth here to add an extra fan in is only like 22 to 23 millimeters. Now the standard depth of a fan is 25 millimeters, so you're going to have to use a slim fan to replace this with. Now that, for me, extremely annoying. 2 millimeters, 2 to 3 millimeters, and you would have been able to fit a standard fan in. Why? Like, it's almost like, I've said this in the written review, it's almost as if the case was designed by two completely different people and then mashed together. Half of the features of this case are amazing, and then the other half make me think, who designed this? Why is it so short from the finish line in terms of, like, being so good? Like, 2 millimeters, they could have made the case 2 millimeters wider. Wouldn't have made a difference to anything else other than the fact that you can fit a standard fan in. Why? But moving on, let's forget about that for a second. We have 3 drive bays here, 3.5-inch drive bays, and 2 of them come with these mounts to fit 2 2.5-inch SSDs on. So you can fit a total of 4 SSDs natively and an standard 3.5-inch drive bay, a standard 3.5-inch hard drive, sorry. And you can obviously customize that and change that around to whatever suits your needs. Now, having 3 in a case like this is good, but I do think that they could have fit 4 in. But at the same time, 3 is a lot more than some other case companies will provide with their cases. Now, if I tip the case over so you can see the top, what you can notice is, you might be able to see, around about here, and here, and here, and here, and here, and here, and here, there is cable management loops all over the case for cable management. Sorry. So not only do you have the front panel connections that you can remove, but you also have cable management. So this case is actually really, really good for cable management, as well as these kind of rails here. I can see, these being a good place to essentially tie cables to. And you also have a bar here to strengthen the case, which you can move up and down here depending on what you have in your system. Now, something that confused me was where the case, the 5.25-inch drive bay connects to the case up here, you have screws, but then it's rivets everywhere else. So I'm really confused at why the screws are there. Maybe it's so that you can remove everything else by drilling out rivets, and you can just leave the 5.25-inch drive bay in or whatever. But then, it still really kind of confused me. Other than that, we essentially, I don't think there's much else to cover other than the fact, you've got toolless here, and it fits basically full-length graphics cards. Now, that is something I wanted to cover. The fact it fits full-length graphics cards, and it fits a full-size ATX power supply is perfect for gaming. I've seen systems where they fit full-length graphics cards but only have SFX power supplies, and the largest SFX power supply that I've seen is 450 watts, and essentially, what are you going to get out of that? How are you going to fit like a GTX Titan in with a 450 watt power supply? Right, the last thing I want to cover before we wrap up this video review is the fact that the power supply is mounted directly above the motherboard. Now, for some of you, it might not be that important, but in terms of cooling, this can be either a disaster for those people who don't know what they're doing, or it could be potentially amazing. Now, this system will fit, I believe it's 65mm coolers. Let me check here. Yeah, it fits 65mm CPU coolers. Now, I think it's one of the Noctua coolers designed for this kind of system is 66mm. So again, it's 1mm difference between having a potentially terrible CPU cooler and having a perfect CPU cooler for this system. And these coolers, basically what they're designed to do is they're designed to have kind of top-down cooling, but they're designed to be used in a way where you manipulate the fan on the power supply to be used as the fan on the CPU cooler itself. So what you can do is you can mount the power supply fan down, and it will pull air through the fins of the heatsink on your CPU cooler and use that to cool the CPU cooler. Now, again, 1mm difference. I don't know in this particular case whether it will matter and whether it will bend into something slightly, but work overall. I can see it working, but essentially, if they made it fit 66mm or whatever, it would be a lot better if it would fit them natively. Now, for those of you who aren't that particularly knowledgeable in cooling, if you are going to be using a standard type cooler where it's low profile or whatever, and it has a fan on and the fan's blowing down on the cooler, what you want to take notice of is the fact that if you have the fan and the power supply fan down, what you will end up having is competition over air, where the fan on the power supply up here and the fan on the cooler will be competing for the air between where those two fans are, because they're both pulling in like opposite directions. So remember, if you are having a CPU cooler with the fan blowing down, remember to have your power supply taking air out the top, so you have the power supply fan upwards. If you have a CPU cooler which can manipulate the fan on the power supply, have the fan on the power supply coming from down up. So have the power supply fan down. Other than that, let's go and wrap up this video review, and I'll give you my conclusion on the fan as well as my performance opinions. So the Cooler Master Elite 120 Advanced case, in my opinion, is a very nice looking case, and it does have a good level of compatibility with a lot of stuff, whether it be full-length graphics cards or full-size ATX power supplies or 5 1/4 inch drive bays. It does have a good range of choices and options for an ITX case. That being said, it also has a few downsides, and that is in terms of compatibilities on cooling. The 80mm fan on the side, is just a tiny bit too thin for you to mount standard fans, and on the CPU cooler is the tiniest bit too small in terms of its native compatibility to mount a cooler that I would have deemed acceptable for this level of build. So it's really a case where you have to decide whether or not you want to deal with the negatives for this case to actually get the benefits of positives. And really, to put it simply, this is a problem with all ITX cases. Due to the size of the cases, you are limited whatever you do. I don't think there is a design to date, apart from the BitPhoenix Prodigy, which I really wouldn't class as an ITX case anyway, where you are kind of stuck in terms of your compatibility. Now, personally, I love the case. I would have used it in my own as like my own ITX system if some of those negatives hadn't been something that I was so passionate about. But that being said, I've forgotten what I was going to say. Okay, so that being said, if this case was 2mm bigger in every dimension, it probably would have been able to kind of solve all those problems that I had listed before. Now, personally, I like this case, and it's, when I look at the price that this case comes in at, I think, well, this has essentially been designed for one thing and one thing only, and that is for an actual budget ITX system. Now, when I say budget ITX system, I mean a amazingly powerful system, but without having to shed out tons of money just to make it a much smaller case, a much smaller system. Now, it can fit the full-size graphics cards, the full-size ATX power supplies, the full-size 5 1/4 inch drive bays and everything, 3.5 inch drive bays. Now what this means is that you can fit what essentially are kind of cheaper products rather than the smaller versions. Now SFX power supplies, they are smaller, they're also more expensive, and they only go up to around 450, 500 watts on ones that I would recommend, rather than, you know, the cheaper ones that are rated that high but I wouldn't trust. Now what this means is you are getting a budget case. I say budget, it's a cheaper case than its competitors, still got the build quality though, and you're getting a cheaper case in which you can put cheaper components in which do exactly the same job. For example, 5 1/4 inch drive bay is just off the top of my head, you know, 11 to 13 pounded for a basic drive, whereas a slimline or a slot loading you might be looking a little bit more. And it also gives you that expandability of putting something else in rather than a drive bay, as well as the, like I said, the power supply, and also it fits dual slot graphics cards in and 3.5 inch hard drives. So essentially this gives you the opportunity to build a good gaming system in a small form factor. It does have its downsides, but if you can live with it, this is going to be a perfect case for you, and that's why we've awarded it the Bronze Award. If you want to check out the value and overall performance ratings of this case, check out the written review, and it's time for me to say good. So that was the video review of the Coolmaster Elite 120 Advanced case. If you have any questions or want to contact us for any reason, whether it be to request us to review a product or just for general business, use the appropriate emails down below. While you're doing that, you can also check out the Haltech TV website, links are also down below, and bookmark it while you're there, because there's a lot of content there that you won't find anywhere else on the Haltech TV network. Also, if you're doing all of that, you might as well like the Facebook page, and also there's the Hal Thompson Facebook page, where I post a lot of behind the scenes stuff and upcoming stuff, so you get a kind of first sort of list of what's coming up, rather than, you know, having to check back every day. So you get to see what's coming up before it's actually being released. Other than that, I'm Hal Thompson, and this is another Haltech TV video. Don't forget to subscribe, do everything I've just asked you to do, and goodbye.